Whether as breadwinners or caregivers, women face many demands and pressure to put their own needs in the background, but there's an effort to help women put a focus on self-care while strengthening their connections as people of color. To tell us about that is the founder of the Sankofa Education Group, Linda Solomon. Thank you very much for being with us, Linda.
Thank you for having me.
First, I want to talk about that word, Sankofa. What's so important about that?
Well, you know, it actually is an African symbol of a bird that has its head looking backwards. I actually brought one for you to see. But it symbolizes before you go ahead, you have to know where you came from.
And talk about what this meant for you, because I'm sure you reached one of those stages, as many of us do in our lives, when you got to sort of almost do a reset and get into that self-care. Talk about what that meant for you.
You know, I came to realize that everything that we do is connected to something, right? And that, and so you have to have a foundation. And having a foundation, you can then move forward with some understanding of what's going on. When people understand the story, understand the why, then they're able to move forward with some purpose. And so knowing my history, people knowing their history, I think gives them a sense of pride, gives them a foundation from which to move forward. And so,
well, talk about some of your own history too, because whether it's when you were younger or people in your family further back, either achieving something or dealing with a struggle, what comes to your mind?
Well, you know what comes to my mind is my family, both of my parents are from the South. And my family moved from Roxbury to Rosendale. And I was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6. And when I moved there, this family, this mother held me so her son could hit me. And she felt very comfortable doing that. And it was a new experience for me, because in Roxbury, I was surrounded by people who looked like me. And so that was my real first encounter with that kind of treatment. And I think from then I've just been sensitive to the black-white issues. And then I went to school in Rosendale, and another thing that comes to mind is I'm allergic to milk and eggs. And I would be sitting outside the hall in a chair from lunch on because I didn't drink the milk. And so, you know, those are two things that come to mind that kind of bring home.
And it's a problem shared by a lot of people, because a lot of people are lactose intolerant.
Yes. And being a little kid, I would imagine that the administrators, teachers at the school that's like a no-brainer. Like, you know what I'm saying? To have a kid sitting out trying to force them to drink something that they're allergic to.
You talked to me about something in your childhood that was, I'm sure, that was very hurting, and a lot of people, they grew up as adults, and I think there are a lot of messages out there saying, well, put that behind you, move ahead, do what other people need you to do. But talk about how important it is to get into your group and being able to talk about something like that.
You know, it's interesting that trauma, and I consider those situations a little traumatic. And then, I went through busing where people were banging on the buses, and there were adults banging and screaming and all of that. And so those types of little traumas affect people. That's not something that you can sort of put behind you. It's clearly not something that guides my thinking every day, but it's not, it impacts what I do. Right, I've had white friends who, like my best friend growing up is white. So it's not that my idea of white people was tainted, but just the inequity and the unfairness was there, and I think what I experienced was minimal compared to what other people may have experienced. So I think being able to come together, talk about those experiences, and sort of make sense of it so that I can change that narrative is really important. Trauma is major, In fact, there's been a lot of research that demonstrates now that trauma can be passed on through your DNA. and research has been done with Holocaust, the children of Holocaust survivors, and their children demonstrate post-traumatic stress syndrome symptoms. Do you know what I mean? And so you can imagine if that's true for Holocaust survivors, then it would absolutely be true for people who experienced slavery. My mother was not a slave, but she certainly picked cotton. And I remember her talking about stories where she was picking cotton and she was petrified of the snakes who, I guess, in cotton fields. And cotton has these prickly things like roses. And so I remember her talking about those experiences. So all of that stuff just informs what I do. I think it's part behind my passion. People need to feel good about who they are, whether it's black, white, whatever. And so coming together and talking about our experiences and the positives as well as the negatives sort of, I think, gives people a foundation, or again, gives people an opportunity to talk about it, sort of make sense of it so that they can move forward without that lingering.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with Linda Solomon of the Sankofa Education Group. Linda, one of the other things I think that you're going to have people paying attention to in these groups is self-care. What does self-care mean exactly?
Well, you know, self-care means taking care of yourself, being mindful that you as an individual need to be getting enough rest, eating well, paying attention to you, how you look, how you feel physically, mentally, emotionally. And I think for females, especially females of color, we have historically been the caretakers of other people, children, our parents, our children working, trying to survive. The plight of black males is such that females have had to play roles that that other women may not have to play. And so there's not a lot of time left for taking self-care. And so and it's, you know, you've heard, you cannot love yourself. If you don't love yourself, then you cannot love anyone else, right? I don't think anyone will dispute that. And so we need to just, I think as females, and particularly females of color, slow down, look at what we're doing, assess that, and make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, taking long baths, eating healthy, meditating, but just making sure that we're okay, that we're healthy. So that
and to have other women say, yeah, you should do that, you know, don't deny yourself. This
Right.
is not a luxury, it's a necessity, right?
It is not a luxury. It's, you know, self-care is not a luxury, and it's not an indulgence, really. It's something that everyone should do. And when you're preoccupied with so many other things, self-care a lot of times for us is not on the top of our list.
Well, we should mention, first of all, when you're going to have your next get-together. That's going to be at the Grove Hall Library, I think.
It's at the Grove Hall Library tomorrow from 1 to 3. We have a facilitator. There'll be this group, actually there's a group of females, women who will be engaged in a circle, in a conversation. There'll be a facilitator, and we sit in a circle. I'm a circle practitioner, which is about emotional literacy. And so there'll be a women's group and there'll be a men's group. Both groups will be meeting independently. We'll be addressing the same questions, and then we'll come together at the end.
And what time is this going to start?
Starts at 1 o'clock.
And finally, we should mention people who want some more information. You got a website, maybe?
Yes, the website is the Sankofa Education Group.com.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Linda Solomon from the Sankofa Education Group.
Yes.
We'll have more news in just a moment.